disappears and you can only pin,
Mm.
which is I don't get that at all, But anyway, it's not everybody else's problem. Good Shabbos to everybody. I'm here with Cantor Lauren. It's just the two of us in virtual world. This, I think, is a first for us, right?
Yeah.
Right, because during the early Zoom, it was just me doing Saturday mornings, and you were just with us on Friday nights. So, we're we're experimenting. We're gonna do this as best as we can. But certainly, I'm grateful for being here with you. I'm grateful for being here with all of you, and we're gonna begin our service with a lot of gratitude, beginning on page 186. Modeh. We'll turn now to page 192, Ma Tovu. We're now to page 195, Asher Yatzar.
Asher Yatzar et ha'adam bechokma u'baro nekavim nekavim chalulim chalulim kalui ve'yadua lifnei chisech ovadecha she'im yepateach echad mehem o yesatam echad mehem אי אפשר להתקיים ולעמוד לפניך ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות.
Page 196, a prayer for our souls, Elohai Neshama. turn now to page 198, Nisim B'chol Yom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach bivina lafin meyom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokach haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'aef koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir shinam einai u'tenuma me'apapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Oter Yisrael b'tifarah. Turn now to page 204, and we'll read together first in Hebrew at the top of the page and then English at the bottom. Blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. O Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. And we're now on page 212. And Lauren, did you want me to do this or you got this one? Okay, we're going to switch it back to me then. This is how easy it is. All right, Baruch Shamar, page 212. Baruch Shehamar ve'aya haolam Baruch hu Baruch Oseh ve'reshit Baruch Omer ve'yoser Baruch Ozer u'mekayem Baruch merachem al haaretz Baruch merachem al habriot Baruch meshalem sachar tov lirehav Baruch Hailad v'kayam lanetzach, Baruch Pohodeh u'matzil, Baruch Shemo, b'shvachot u'b'zmirot negadelcha, u'nshabecha neferecha v'naskir shimcha v'namicha malkeinu Eloheinu, Yachid chei ha'olamim, melech meshubach u'mufar deyad Shemo hagadol, Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal batishvachot. We're now on page 214, the second line down from the very top. Tov lehodol Adonai, Tov lehodol Adonai, ulezamer, leshimcha elyon, Tov lehodol Adonai. Lehagid b'haboker chastecha, Lehagid b'haboker chastecha, Ve'emunatcha b'halelot, Ve'emunatcha b'halelot, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. Alei asur ve'lenavel, alei higayon bechinor. Yisimachtani Adonai befo'alecha, b'maasei yadecha ranen. Magalu, ma'asechayam, me'od hamtu machshevotecha. Magalu, ma'asechayam, me'od amku machshevotecha. Magalu, ma'asechayam, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. We're on page 215. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Yehalelucha Od Yehalelucha Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Od Yehalelucha Od Yehalelucha Selah. Continue silently from the bottom to the next page. V'anachnu nevarech Yam me'ata v'ad olam me'ata v'ad olam me'ata v'ad olam Hallelujah 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 Hallelujah. We'll turn it back to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 218, Psalm 1.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah,
Nishmat kol echai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. We continue silently on page 219. Now on page 220, Ilufinu at the top of the page. Ilufinu maleh shira kayam ulshonenu rina kamon galav ושפתותינו שבח כמרחבי רקיע, ועינינו מאירות כשמש וכירח, וידינו פרוסות כנשרי שמיים, ורגלינו קלות כחיילות. אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו. We continue silently. Okay, we'll turn it back to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 222. No, it says you on here, but I will do it any case. Page 222. Second paragraph down. Let me switch back to me. All right, Shochen Ad, second paragraph down from the top. Shochen Ad, Marom v'kadosh Shemo v'chatu v'hanenu tzadikim b'Adonai la'yesharim na'ava tehilam v'fi yesharim tihitalalu divrei tzadikim tihitbarachu b'lshon chasidim tihitromamu b'kerev kedoshim tihitgadashu ma'kehalot ribevot amcha beit Yisrael berina yitbar Shimcha malkeinu bechol dor Vador yababai yababai bye 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 yababai yababai bye bye yai bye bye yai bye bye yababai bye 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 aya bye bye yababai yai bye bye. We'll turn now to page 223, Yishtabach, which will then lead into the Chatzi Kaddish on the next page and the Baruch Hu on the page after that. Yishtabach Shimecha Alad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VeHaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Lecha Na'e Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avotinu V'Imotenu Shir Shvacha Alav Zimra U'Zumemshala HaNetzach Gedula ugvura, tila u'tiferet, kedusha u'malchut, brachot ve'hodaot, me'ata ve'ad olam, baruch atah Adonai, el melech gadol batishbachot, el hodaot Adon haniflaot, abocher b'shirei zimra, melech el ha'olamim. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, ve'alma livrachirtei, ve'amlich malchutei, V'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael B'hagala u'bizman kariv v'imeru Amen. Yeshmei Rabba mevarach le'alam u'yalmei almayam Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbahar v'yitroram v'yitnaseh v'yitadahar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekuhu shabrichu Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata Damiran be'alma v'imeru amen. Now page 226. Barechu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. And now we'll turn back to Cantor Lauren and page 228, Yotzor.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu We'll now continue on page 230. Ahavatanu Adonai Eloheinu Chemla gedola v'tera chamot aleinu Ba'avur avotenu ve'imotenu shebachu lecha avur imotenu ותלמדם חוקי חיים כן תכוננו למדנו המרחם רחם עלינו רחם עלינו ותן בליבנו להבינו השכיל לשמוע ללמוד וללמד לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה להאהב ליבנו את תורתך לדבק ליבנו במצוותיך ויחד לבבינו באהבה וליראה את שמך לא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא פתחנו נגילה ונשמחה בשורתך להביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ לתוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו כי אל בואי ישועות אתה אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד.
Please join me on page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Page 236. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר בני ישראל ואמרת להם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו, זכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם emet. We'll turn now to page 239 and read together at the top of the page in English. Emet, there is no place where you are not. Even in the wilderness, there is your word. Emet, that pen strokes of lightning, white fire, black flame, stir the soul's passion, guide our sacred way, true and enduring is Torah. Your truth for us is certain and established, now and forevermore. Like Moses, Miriam, and all Israel, we sing out and rejoice. As we turn back to Cantor Lauren, and we turn to page 240, Mi Chamocha.
Mi Chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha kedar hakodesh, Torah tehilot osef elet, shira chadasha shibechu gehulim, לשמחה זכד הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדקנו מך יהודה וישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל.
In a moment, Cantor will lead us on page 242 as we begin the Amidah together, and then we will continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and when you're finished, if you are standing, you may be seated.
Adonai sefatayv tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
If you're finishing your silent Amidah, you are welcome to continue. I can always catch up with us in just a few moments, but for those that have finished, we'll turn to page 324 for the repetition of the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Koneh Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Libnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo v'Yahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei Metim Atarav Le'Oshia Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem Mechalkel Chayim B'Chesed Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim V'Rofech Cholim U'Matir Asurim ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מחמוך בגבורות ומידו מלך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים. Turn back over to Cantor Lauren for the Kedusha on page 326.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו משמי מרום, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וכרזה זה, ואומר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר, אדיר, אדירנו, אדוני, אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו מלכנו מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיגו לך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Amen. Turn down to the top of page 329, Yismechu.
ישמחו ומלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו ומלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. מקדשי שבי שבת, כולם ישמחו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. ישמחו ומלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשו שבת, חמדת ימים אותו קראת השבת. ישמחו ומלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. זכר למעשה וראשית שבת, זכר למעשה ישמחו ומלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו רצי רצי ומנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך סבנו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך וטהר ליבנו לעבדך 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 באמת והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה ורצון שמה קודשך וינוחו בישראל מקדשי שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
And we'll turn now to page 330 as we read together in English in the middle of the page. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility, that we may perceive our own faults. And grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai, shotcha levatcha b'ranavon. We turn now to page 332 at the very bottom. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations, modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. We'll turn back to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 334, Sim Shalom.
שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל עמך, ברכנו יוצרנו כולנו כאחד, באור פניך. כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל עמך, תורת חיים ואהבת חסד, ואהבת חסד, וצדקה וברכה ורחמים, וחיים ושלום. וטוב 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 בעיניך לברך המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Turn now to page 337, Oseh Shalom.
עושה שלום ממרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Thank you, Cantor. Take a little bit of a break. Good Shabbos, everybody. So this morning we're going to begin reading the second book of the Torah, the book of Shemot. And of course, the story in the Torah that is, perhaps the most well-known, largely in thanks to the creation of the holiday of Pesach and the Haggadah and this retelling and the obligation to retell the story in total. The reality is that, for most, I shouldn't say most, for many Jews, we're not necessarily in shul every single week. We're not necessarily reading the Torah every week, perhaps as we might or should. And so Pesach gives us this sort of unique opportunity where we retell this whole story of the Exodus in, bite-sized forms, quite literally. But it sticks out in so many ways, and it becomes really, in essence, the national narrative of the Jewish people. As I said many times before, the book of Breshit is really largely concerned with origins and with one family in particular. And when we left off last week, we ended with Joseph's bones being carried back to Canaan, to the land of Israel, eventually to be called the land of Israel, to be buried alongside with his father and his mother and the rest of his family. But the narrative doesn't stop there, right? Left behind are all the generations of people who have now taken up residence in the land of Goshen in Egypt. And as we see at the beginning of this week's Parsha, it doesn't take very long for the good deeds of Joseph for the Egyptian people to fade into history. And very quickly we see the tide turning and our ancestors enslaved and degraded and ultimately speaking, living in quite a terrible state. And of course, this is also the Parsha where we're first introduced to Moshe Rabbeinu, our great teacher, our great prophet Moses, and his unique history and how he came to be and find himself first in the wilderness, encountering God, and then eventually leading the Jewish people to freedom. And of course, like all stories, it begins in unexpected kinds of ways. And so Moshe really only finds himself capable or in the position to be meeting God once he has had to really run for his life. The story, as it's told in this week's Parsha, is that although Moses grows up in the Pharaoh's house, he sees at one point an Egyptian taskmaster beating on an Israelite, and he takes the life of the taskmaster. And he then has to run, and he runs from his adoptive family, and he finds himself in the wilderness in the land of Midian. And he eventually finds his wife Zipporah, and they marry, and they begin what seems like a perfectly reasonable life, tending to the flock, living in the desert, living with a family that has taken him in yet again. And Moses sort of bouncing from family to family. And you can imagine that the story could end there, and it would be a perfectly, maybe not pleasant ending, but certainly Moses would be left in a place where he could live the rest of his life in a certain amount of peace and security. But of course, that's not how it goes. And so we have this really remarkable experience of Moses walking in the wilderness and coming upon a sneh, a bush. But if any of you again have spent any time, especially in the Negev or in the Sinai deserts, this you can imagine is not just any kind of bush, certainly not the bushes outside my windows right here, but something that really is parched and dry and inflamed, right? Consumed by flame, and yet at the same time not consumed. And so Moshe has this really powerful interaction with the spirit or essence or the presentation of God in this world in the form of a bush that was not consumed by fire, even though it was a flame. And there's lots of little pieces of this story, which we'll probably get to a little bit more in detail in the Torah study. But one that I think stands out a lot and is oft considered, but I ran into a commentary this week that pushed it a little bit, is this interaction that Moses has with God, in which he rightfully so is concerned, right? God says you need to go and free my people, free your people. And he has lots of concerns about that, right? As we know, he says, I'm not the person for the job. He points out the fact that he is, hard of speech, that many translate as a stutterer, but simply meaning that, the spoken word is not his great strength. He seems like the odd choice. And he's particularly concerned about going not just to the Pharaoh, right? Our assumption is that he's most freaked out, understandably, about going to the Pharaoh. That's for sure. But he's also equally concerned about going to his people and saying that he speaks on behalf of God and that he is going to take them out of bondage at God's hand and they will be free. And why is he concerned? Why is it legitimate to be concerned? Because he's assuming and anticipating what is, empirically proven to be a human characteristic, which is cynicism, which is skepticism, which is wondering, who is this guy Moses? Why is he saying that he speaks for God, and how are we to trust him? So you get this very interesting interaction and a very enigmatic phrase uttered by God. So when God says, right, or Moses says, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, this is in verse 13 of chapter 3, for those that are following at home. And I apologize ahead of time. I don't have my Humashim from work with me. It's one thing I forgot other than my talus. So you're going to try to look for, again, chapter 3 of the book of Exodus, and we're looking at verse 13 and 14. And so Moses says to God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? In other words, it's not enough to say that the God of their ancestors is the one that sent Moses along, but really they need something to identify you with. They need some proof that I am who I am, and I'm saying what I'm saying because you have, you, God, are, a part of this. So then God writes back, again, as I said, enigmatically, and says back, Eheyeh asher eheyeh. And you'll find actually in many translations that there isn't even an attempt to translate that into English. I'll give you what is the most common translation in the section. But he says, and he continues, and thus shall you say to the Israelites, Eheyeh sent me to you. Okay, so let's break this down in a couple of interesting pieces. So the first is this phrase, Eheyeh asher eheyeh. So the reason why it tends to be translated just into a transliteration of the Hebrew is because it's very hard to translate it directly. Eheyeh is from the Hebrew root to be. Eheyeh is the first person future tense. Okay, so Eheyeh would mean, right, I will be, asher that, Eheyeh, that I will be. In other words, I am's what I am is what Papa used to say, right? I will be what I will be. But, I am's what I am as a joke isn't really accurate here because the focus is on the future. Eheyeh asher eheyeh. So that's the first piece that needs a little bit of clarification. Okay, but the second piece of it, so Lauren was asking, what are the verses again? Chapter 3, verses 13 and 14. And then Lauren will tell me what the page number is, and I will let you know. Sorry, I'm looking at another screen, so I don't always see the chats. But Lauren, as always, really appreciate your backup. So the second question that's logical to ask here is, if God says, my name is El Moshe, Eheyeh asher eheyeh. Okay, so then the sentence should be ended there. That's all we really need. But then we get a continuation. In most cases, the translation is, right, he continued, thus shall you say. Okay, I think Lauren has found our page number. Women's Commentary is page 315. Thank you, Lauren. And ultimately speaking, but Tomar Libnei Israel, Eheyeh shalachani elechem. So here's the strange piece of it. If God says, my name is Eheyeh asher eheyeh, that's the name that I should be known by, why then at the latter part of this sentence, first of all, why do we continue the sentence at all? Why is that necessary? And the latter part of the sentence, why does it then say, what you should say to the Israelites is that Eheyeh sent me to you? So in essence, God is saying two things. God's saying, right, that name is Eheyeh asher eheyeh, but when you talk to the Israelites, just say that Eheyeh sent you. So it's kind of like me saying, right, my name is Rabbi Daniel Geffen, but just tell him Rabbi Dan sent you. Right? It's a shortened form of the same phrase. And we could be forgiven by assuming, right, that that's just all it's intended, right, for brevity's sake, a nickname, a nom de guerre of some sort, right? That rather than going through the trouble of saying Eheyeh asher eheyeh, just be easy for them and just say Eheyeh, they'll get it. They'll get it. So, of course, that's not a sufficient answer for the rabbis ever, right? It's never that simple. And so there are two commentaries that I just want to bring in, which I thought were fascinating. And as I said, pushed me to think a little bit differently about this phrase. So the first comes from Chizkuni. Chizkuni was a medieval, I think, 13th century commentator. So he writes as follows. He says, the first word Eheyeh is the name of God. The second is an explanation of why God is called Eheyeh. In other words, the reason why, quote, my name, being God's name, is Eheyeh is because I am eternal, immutable. I am therefore a most reliable God in the sense of dependable helper and savior, as I will always be around. My quote-unquote lifespan is not, as that word suggests, a limited period, but I am not subject to any limitations. I will still be on the side of the Jewish people at the time when I redeem them from the sufferings in Egypt, as I already promised by Yaakov to Joseph earlier in Genesis 48:21. In other words, the name revealed to Moses here by God was not a new name. Yaakov had already been familiar with it. It is one of the attributes of God, who has many attributes. And God tells Moses that anyone who legitimizes himself as speaking of the God called Eheyeh will be believed. The fact is that all the Israelites did believe Moses when he identified himself as speaking in the name of the God of this God, as we read in a little bit in chapter 4, verse 31. So Chizkuni basically says a couple important things. He says that really God's name is Eheyeh, not Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh. The Asher Eheyeh is a descriptor. It's an attribute. It's a way of implying, right, that God will always be there, right? In the future will always be. That future can be a second from now. It can be 10 million years from now. That is the attribute of God that is being directed here. And for those that have been with us in Torah study the last few weeks, Myra had brought up a really interesting question about the various names of God that appear in the Torah. And that one of the things that we talked about is that a lot of times the different names, the stand-in names for God, are meant to be highlighting a particular kind of attribute. So God's steadfastness, God's appearing in the future, it makes a lot of sense, says Chizkuni, that really it's not an odd thing at all, that really God's name is just Eheyeh, as it implies at the end of the Pasuk, and that the reason it says Asher Eheyeh at the beginning is that it's a descriptor. It's an attribute. It's a way of understanding what it is that God is and why God would refer to God's self as I will be. Okay, so now I want to bring a second commentary. This is from a collection of commentaries known as the Adas Israel, which is, if I remember correctly, really the generation of the Tosafot, again, 13th century, Rashi's grandchildren largely, and students writing on this portion. So here they pick up on some of the same things as Chizkuni, but they add an important layer at the end. So they say, all right, God says, Eheyeh. Why did the Torah have to repeat so many times, Eheyeh? He said of God in verses 14 and 16, when we have not been told that Moses replied to any of these pronouncements of God. So in other words, why are there so many vayomers when there hasn't really been that many back and forths? We have to understand this as God feeling the need to explain statements he had made, such as that his name is Eheyeh, meaning that seeing that he is eternal, this should be reflected in his very name. The words Asher Eheyeh may be meant to define this very attribute, right? What Chizkuni was basically saying. Okay, now here's where it starts to get interesting. Now, in order to make sure that Moses would not think that his name is actually Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, okay, so again, at the beginning of this pasuk, Moses might assume, as we assumed going into this conversation, that God's name is Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, not just Eheyeh. He tells Moses precisely how to answer the elder's question about who it is that sent him. Hence the instruction in Hebrew, Ko Tomar. So again, in the English translations, a lot of times they don't really even translate Ko Tomar, or they just say that it's a continuation of the phrase. But what the Datskenim say is that Ko Tomar means really, you shall word it precisely this way. Okay, in other words, this is exactly what you say to the elders when they ask you who it is that has sent you. You must say it precisely this way. Now here's where the wrinkle comes in. As far as the people of Israel is concerned, the fact that God had no beginning is of secondary interest. What matters to them is that he will continue to exist forever without Egypt. Okay, let me say that one more time. As far as the people of Israel are concerned, the fact that God has no beginning is of secondary interest. What matters to them is that God will continue to exist forever. So here is the place where I think I've been pushed a little bit in thinking about this, and something of actually kind of a sad commentary on humanity and on human beings. Right? It's hard to know exactly what God intends by this phrase, if the Datskenim are correct, by saying basically in anticipation of the way that our human minds tend to think. The past doesn't even really matter in this case, right? Whether God was there at day 1 or God showed up at day 20, is less material to the mindset of the Israelites in this case. All they care about, at least according to this reading, is that God will be with them going forward, right? That they won't be abandoned. And I think there is something challenging about this theologically, and challenging about this as human beings, because I think it does speak to part of our one of our frustrations as we are in life, right? Is that really all we kind of care about is, what are you going to do for me now, right? What have you done for me lately? What will you do for me tomorrow, right? We're not, right? You can be the most thoughtful, kindest person for 20, 25, 30 years, but if your next crisis of your friend or your family member comes along and you're not there for them in that moment, all of that previous stuff no longer matters, right? Only matters is, were you there for me today? Were you there for me tomorrow? Were you there for me the next day? Right? The way that we tend to think is in those kinds of terms. And it's sort of odd in the way that we really struggle as human beings to actually plan and think for the future. We struggle with that around climate change. We struggle with that around, social justice work. We struggle around that in a lot of ways. And yet at the same time, when it comes to, situations in which we're on the receiving end, all we are consumed with is the future. All we are concerned with is the next thing that we need, or the next thing that we need to get. And it's sort of, as I said, it's something of a sad commentary that this is the way that God sort of sees things, is to know that for Moses to be able to communicate what needs to be communicated, they don't really need to hear or care that this is the God that has been there from the very beginning, that created the heaven and the earth, right? That the only thing that is going to sate their need for comfort, right, their need for a sense that things are going to be okay, is this promise of what tomorrow and the next day and the next day will be. That God will be there, forever. And it's not to say that I don't appreciate that concept, right? I think all of us would want to know that, a God that loves us and protects us and is involved in our lives is going to be there for the rest of our lives and the rest of our children's lives, and so on and so forth. But I think it's hard to imagine living a faithful-based life, right? A life in which we believe in the God that is capable of doing those things, without caring equally about the fact that God has been there since the beginning. Right, that God is the creator of heaven and earth and all of us and all of the circumstances that we are in. It seems sort of an odd phrase to say that the only thing that our people care about is, future examples in which God saves us. It should matter a lot, if not more so, right? That God is the God of our ancestors, and not just our ancestors, but of the primordial world, right? Before there is even a concept of what we are and what our world is about. And I think we have to be very careful in general, both in our spiritual lives, not to become so fixated on God as being there for us the next crisis or the next time that we need God only, but to be equally present and equally caring of all of the circumstances in our lives and previous in which we have felt blessed by the presence of God. And that we don't ultimately look at our relationship with God in such, unbalanced terms. And I think, as I said, it's not just the Israelites who are in bondage who get this kind of designation or this kind of understanding. I think it's still all of us, right? This is still the way that we tend to think about things theologically, is really, what have you done for me lately? And I find that really problematic theologically. Faith asks of us a lot of things, but one is to consider not just our present and not just our future, but also our collective past. And I think, for me, I think there is a powerful statement that God is trying to make here, but I wish that it wasn't pulled back in this way, right? That I think that the entire name is really the more accurate name. That even if we acknowledge the Datzkenim and the Chizkuni's perspective, that really Eheyeh Asher Eyeh is the more appropriate designation and the more appropriate name of God, the more full understanding of what God is and will be and was. And I think that when we shorten things down, when we truncate things in that kind of way, when we oversimplify the complex, we don't really do ourselves any great service. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and what will be in the rest of our service beginning on page 362, and then we can discuss a little bit more in our Torah study in just a bit. So Torah service just for this morning, one explanation. We'll do everything in the Torah service, including reading Torah, but because I don't have the physical Torah with me at home, we won't do the blessings before and afterwards. I'll put the Torah reading up on screen. Thanks again to Candy Lauren, who found that Women's Commentary, page 315. We're going to start a little bit earlier, so just that everyone gets ready. We're going to read from the beginning of chapter 3, verse 1, and so long as my lungs don't give out, we will be all the way until verse 15, completing what would be the fourth aliyah traditionally read in the 7 Aliyah triennial cycle. But before we get to any of that good stuff, we're going to turn to page 362 in Kamocha at the very top of the page. Ein kamocha b'Elohim Adonai v'ein k'ma'asecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'hador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai yahoz lamo yiten Adonai yevarech Et amo b'shalom, Abba harachamim, etiva bertzoncha, et Zion, tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki b'cha levad batachnu, melech el v'nisa, Adon olamim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, Le'amo Yisrael v'kdushato. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Galul Adonai iti uner hamima Shemo yachdav. Lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod. Ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, Ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, Lecha Adonai hamamlacha, Ve'amit nahaseh lechol erosh. Okay, and thanks again to Gander Lauren who figured out. It's page 314 is the beginning of chapter 3 in the women's commentary. I'm sorry I don't have the platform in front of me, but I'm sure, again, these are sort of what we call synagogue skills. We should be able to develop the ability to open the book and use the table of contents and find chapter 3. But it is always more convenient when we have the numbers. So next week I will have everything prepared. But Cantor, thanks for jumping in and making sure that we're all set that way. So what I'm going to do is in a second, I'm going to share screen so that you can see what I am chanting off. And that way, if anybody doesn't have a copy at home, and Cantor, you'll tell me if you can't see it clearly. Hopefully you can see it.
Looks great.
Looks great. Okay. And I really have absolutely no excuse this morning if I get things wrong. So you can call me out for it if I don't get it exactly right. So again, we're going to begin with chapter 3, verse 1. U'Moshe haya ro'eh et tzon yitro choteno kohen Midian vayinaheg et hatzon achar hamidbar vayavo el har ha'Elohim choreva vayar Malach Adonai elav belabat esh mitoch hasanem vayar vehine hasanem beor boer baesh vehasane einenu ukal vayomer Moshe Asurana ve'er'eh et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh madua lo yiv'ar hasnem vayar Adonai kisar lir'ot vayikra elahav Elohim mitoch Hasne vayomer Moshe Moshe vayomer hineni vayomer al tikrav halom shal na'alecha me'al raglecha ki hamakom asher ata omed alav admat kodesh hu vayomer anochi Elohei avicha Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Vayaster Moshe panav, Ki yarem mehabit el ha'elohim, Vayomer Adonai ro'et ra'iti, Et oni ami asher b'mitzrayim, וצעקתם שמעתי מפני נוגשיו, כי ידעתי את מכאוביו, וארד להצילו מיד מצרים, ולהלתו מן הארץ ההיא, אל ארץ טובה ורחובה, אל ארץ זבת חלב ודבש, אל מקום הכנעני והחיתי והאמורי והפריזי והחיבי והיבוסי. ועתה הנה צעקת בני ישראל באה אליי, וגם ראיתי את הלחץ אשר מצרים לוחצים אותם, ועתה לך ואשלחך אל פרעה והוצא את עמי בני ישראל ממצרים. ויאמר משה אל האלוהים, מי אנוכי? כי אלך אל פרעה וכי אוציא את בני ישראל ממצרים. ויאמר כי אהיה עמך, וזה לך האות, כי אנוכי שלחתיך והוציאך את העם ממצרים. תעבדון את האלוהים על ההר הזה. ויאמר משה אל האלוהים, הנה אנוכי בא אל בני ישראל, ואמרתי להם, אלוהי אבותיכם שלחני עליכם, ואמרו לי מה שמו, מה אומר עליהם. ויאמר אלוהים אל משה, אהיה אשר אהיה. ויאמר כה תאמר לבני ישראל, אהיה שלחני עליכם. ויאמר עוד אלוהים אל משה, כה תאמר אל בני ישראל, אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, שלחני עליכם, זה שמי לעולם, וזה זכרי לדור דור. Woo. All right. That is, I got you can't see it, but Lauren gave me a class. I thank you. Thank you. Look, from where I started at, it's every week seems at least a slight improvement, but you know, Torah reading takes time, it takes practice. But what if you have trope training? By the way, I don't know if you know this, but I think a combination of like the reform, like the ACC and whatever the equivalent of the ACC is for the conservative movement, purchased the rights to trope trainer software and have like made it a cloud-based thing. Unfortunately, it's more expensive because it's a subscription service, but it is an available thing, and it seems like they added some new crazy stuff. So for those who are interested in learning how to lay and how to read Torah, for me, it was a lifesaver. I just found as a program, it was extremely helpful. So anybody who's interested, if you type in Trope Trainer into Google, it should take you to the webpage. It's pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. So I just want to check and see. I think Marcia, yeah, I was like 2 seconds too late. Marcia, you were on it. It was page 350 in the Platfumash. So that's why we keep our phones handy just in case. So even though again we haven't done blessings and we don't have the Torah with us, we still of course make time to offer our Mishaberach this morning. So we are going to begin by thinking of those on our Mishaberach list, and I'll invite you, those watching at home, to think of your loved ones as well as we read our list of Mishaberach for this morning. First, we'll go to page 371 in our prayer books. Mishaberach Avotenu v'Imotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah U'Yavarech et HaCholim Ha'elu. This morning we begin by thinking of Dina Bat Chana, Benzi Tepper, Cecilia Hirsch, Glenn Tinney, Tzipora Ahava, Gittel Bat Shmuel V'Aviva, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Jeff Baker, David Tosher, Jim Cohn, Monique Rathman, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Raz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tu Menachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klopman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, Idalia Ben Leah, Justin Banner, Tzipora Ahava Bat Yehudit Rachel, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Ira Madras, Ephraim Raphael Ben Esther, and Myra Maslin. And Cantor, anybody that you... Okay. So again, anybody who's watching at home, you can certainly add your loved ones' names as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleichem Lachalimam L'Rapotam L'Chazikam Vishlach Lehem Mehira Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Hashtab Agalav Zman Karev and Omar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, el na refana la, el na refana la, refuah shelema, el na refana lo, el na refana lo, el na refana lo, refuah shelema. And so again, since we don't have a Torah, we won't be doing Hagbah and Galila, so we'll head to page 372 in our prayer books to offer the blessing before the Haftarah. And the Haftarah this morning is from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 27, verses 6 to 28, and then also verse, let's see, a strange way of writing this. Okay, sorry. Chapter 27, verse 6 to chapter 28, verse 13, and then chapter 29, verses 22 and 23. Not an uncommon circumstance where there sometimes is a bit of skipping, especially when it comes to Isaiah, and depending on which Chumash you're using. So again, chapter 27, verse 6 of Isaiah to chapter 28, verse 13, and then chapter 29, verses 22 and 23. And you can always just listen. That is also fine too. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'Moshe abdo u'Yisrael amo v'nviei haemet v'tzedek. Jacob shall come to take root, and Israel shall blossom and bloom. They shall fill the earth with fruit like a medlar when it stands forth runners. Did God strike Israel down like others who were struck? Was Israel slain as God slew the slayers? God contended with them, sending them off with a hot blast, as on the day the east wind comes. And see now, thus shall Jacob's sin be atoned, and this will be the result of removing its guilt. When they grind all their altar stones into powdered limestone, when none of the sacred posts and incense altars are left standing, The fortified city is empty, its homes deserted, forsaken like a wilderness. There calves graze, and there lie down and consume the branches of the trees. When the crown withers, they crack. Women come and use them to kindle fires. Since this people has no understanding, their maker shall show them no pity. Their creator shall show them no mercy. But there will come a day when from the river Euphrates to Egypt's Nile, God will beat out the peoples like grain, and you will be picked up one by one, O people of Israel. And on that day, a great shofar shall be sounded. Those lost in Assyria, those banished to Egypt shall come back and worship the Eternal on the holy mountain in Yerushalayim. Ah, the good and proud garlands of the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is but fading flowers, on the proud heads of gluttons and drunkards. See now, my sovereign has something strong and mighty in store, like a stream of hail, a destructive storm, a downpour of mighty waters overflowing the land. They shall be trampled underfoot, the proud garlands of the drunkards of Ephraim, the faded flowers whose glorious beauty is on the heads of those gluttons. They shall be like an early fig before the summer harvest. Whoever sees it swallows it as soon as it comes to hand. But a day will come when Adonai of heaven's hosts will be a garland of beauty, a diadem of loveliness for the remnant of God's people, a spirit of justice for those who sit as judges, and courage for those who defend the city. But these two are reeling with wine and dazed by liquor. Priest and prophet reel with liquor, are besought with wine, and totter in judgment. Yes, every table is covered with vomit and filth, not a place is left clean. The drunkards say, to whom is he teaching his revelation? To those newly weaned from milk? Therefore teach them one command and then another, one line and then another, a little here, a little there. So the prophet must talk to this crowd with slow speech and simple words, and say to them, here is rest, rest for the weary, repose is here. And still they refuse to listen. To them the word of the Eternal will come, one command and then another, one line and then another, a little here, a little there. But instead of listening, they will march forward, only to fall back hurt. They will be snared and taken captive. The Eternal, the one who saved Abraham, therefore says to the house of Jacob, no more shall Jacob be put to shame, no more shall his face grow pale. For when his children when his children see what I am doing in their midst, they shall hallow my name, hallowing the Holy One of Jacob, and holding Israel's God in awe. So you see again that same sort of phrase of the prophet lamenting the fact that he has to speak slowly and in simple words, right? Because our tendency is, right, we don't hear the message well. And I haven't watched it yet, but there's a Netflix film that is like a DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence movie. And the concept is that there are two astronomers who have found that there is a gigantic asteroid hurling to Earth, and they're trying to tell people that it's happening and that it's going to destroy the Earth. And there's like a scene where they're like on the news, and the news guys try to make a joke out of it. And they're like, well, we try to make the bad news a little bit lighter around here, try to make it more humorous. This, like, as you can see, thousands of years pass by, we're still, satirizing what is a sad reality. But in any case, we're now back in our prayer books, page 372, blessing after laughter. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol adorot, ha'el adem ad haomer v'yoseh, hamdaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל המילים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen. We'll turn now to the bottom of page 376 as we offer a prayer for our country. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace, and may we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. And together we say, Amen. Now, page 377, a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael, V'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reishit Smichat Gulatenu. Hagen Aleha Be'evrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha. Vishlach Orcha V'amitcha L'Rasheha, Sareha V'yoatzeha. V'tachnem Be'etzah Tova Milfanecha, V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. We'll turn now back to page 374 as we conclude the Torah service, beginning at the very top of the page. Yehallelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado, odo al haaretz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren li'amo, tehila lechol chasidav livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al tazovu. Et chaim hi lamachaziki ba betomcheha meusha deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. Ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu kekedem. I can't remember if I'm doing Aleinu or if you're doing Aleinu, so I'm happy to do it if you'd like, or if you would like to do it. Okay, she says yes. Okay, Aleinu Shabbat, page 586, at the very bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol latet gedula leyotzer breshit shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot velo samanu kemishpechot adama shelo sama chelkenu kahem vegor aleinu kechol hamonaham v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're now page 591. V'nemar V'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz V'yom hahu Yeh Adonai echad U'shemo Echad. Now invite our mourners and those observing yard sites to turn to page 598. In a moment, we will recite the mourners Kaddish together. First, we'll acknowledge those who have passed in our community in recent months. Dr. John Abdrakin, Sylvia Alderman, Morris Dickstein, Linda Donath, Ellen Frank, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Deirdre Klein, Jeanette Kopp, Leo Leibowitz, William Lippman, Audrey Lubo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Nancy Nagel, Harry Olstein, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, Dorothy Shupnick, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, Joan Strong Tangzilius, and Virginia Tizer. We also mark the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Miriam de Rothschild, Fred Eber, Iago Galdston, Thomas Nash Glynn, Beatrice Gruber, Sylvia Honig, Ruth Genzer Khan, Rose Koplowitz, Bertha Karp, Rain Kelman, Victor Kessler, Vera Lee, Raymond Levin, Emily Levy, Bob Matlick, Barry Metzger, Morris Peskowitz, Phil Rosenstein, Amy Elizabeth Shapiro, Meyer Jacob Simon, Philip Spiegel, Arnold Spitz, Andrew Strasser, and Nat Zimmerman. And of course, we invite those watching at home to add the names of your loved ones as well. Kidder Lauren, is there anybody else that you had to add? Okay, I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Pagala Uzman Kari Vimru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam Li'almei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei Dekucha B'richu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi Shalom Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim alinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav hu yaseh Shalom alinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Zichronam livracha, may everyone of their memories be for a blessing. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I've got some important announcements. So the first, of course, is to join us for Shabbat Torah study on Zoom at 12 o'clock. A reminder again that next Shabbat as well, just as it was this Shabbat, will be virtual only. And there's a more than likely possibility that may extend into January as the most recent COVID wave is very much in effect. So just please, as always, every week, make sure that you're paying close attention to our Shabbat announcements and to our weekly e-blast for the most up-to-date information. We'll certainly let you know. But for sure, next Shabbat, New Year's Eve Shabbat, we will be virtual again Friday night, where you can join us on Zoom, and Saturday morning, where it'll be live stream. Some other important announcements. This Sunday, the Social Justice Committee will be supporting Maureen's Haven, our local homeless shelter. You can sign up for needed supplies items on the social justice page on our website and get more involved. Monday, Nina Mitz will be meeting at 11:30. Social Justice Committee will meet at 5. And there is no Hebrew school this week because of winter recess. My Wednesday class is at 12 o'clock on Heschel and the Prophets. My Friday class is at 9:15 on Friday mornings and is on the Siddur. We welcome anybody to come, even if you haven't been in all along. And of course, I want to highlight something really wonderful that is coming up in a couple of weeks, which is that the weekend of Parshat Bo, which is the second Shabbat of January. So normally we would have Women's Torah commentary in the first Shabbat. We've moved it to the second for a reason I'll explain in a second. So Leah Oppenheimer will be leading and facilitating our conversation on Shabbat morning or Shabbat afternoon at 12 o'clock on Zoom. And then Sunday, January 9th from 11 to 1 p.m., we are honored to welcome our master teacher, Rabbi Mina Bromberg, who will be joining us from Israel, who is going to focus on Parshat Bo and in particular on the Song of the Sea. And as anybody who's had a chance to study with Rabbi Mina knows that she is a remarkable teacher, a gifted teacher, beautiful voice, certainly, but I think brings a really very special view to the Torah portion and to Torah study in general. And it's especially cool that we get to have this experience with her while she is sitting in Yerushalayim, which is really great. So again, it will be from 11 to 1 o'clock. All people are welcome, every background, every gender, every non-gender, everybody that wants to join us, we are welcoming. Just make sure that you register, that you're there, on time, and that we'll have a little bit of a break, so that you don't have to worry. 2 hours can be a long time, but we'll make sure we have a break to stretch our legs. You're welcome to bring some food along to eat. The main idea is to really enjoy this great opportunity and I really want to thank the leaders of our Women's Torah Commentary Committee. That's Ruth Joseph and Leah Oppenheimer and Margaret Bromberg in particular, but really all the participants for many years now at the temple who've made it into such a wonderful learning opportunity. And I will repeat this till I am blue in the face for my fellow men or people identifying as gendered male. This is open to everyone, and it's a great opportunity to learn. It is not exclusive to women because it's called a Women's Torah Commentary. It's the exact opposite. It is really for everybody to learn, but to have a perspective that for far too long was never given the opportunity to teach. So we are slowly, incrementally trying to change that paradigm, and it has been some of the most meaningful learning that I have been a part of since I've been a rabbi. So please, 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 if you're one of those people who's been, for whatever reason, concerned about that or unsure, know that it is very much a welcoming group for a lot of really great learning. So join us again, Shabbat afternoon on the 8th with Leah Oppenheimer, and then, of course, on Sunday the 9th with Rabbi Mina Bromberg as well. So with that, I realized I left my Kaddish cup in the other room, but I'm going to put Kedra Laura on the spot to tell us about her practicum coming up. That way, it will give me a second to go to the other room and get this, and I'll be right back.
All right, I'll make sure to talk really slowly. So I have a practicum coming up at school. It is going to be on January 12th, which is a Wednesday. The program starts at around 10:30. There will be one person going before me. So I'll probably start at around 11. And my topic is Hanukkah music from around the world. And so I really hope that you all can come and see it, it will be virtual. I will give Rabbi Dan a Vimeo link, hopefully soon, so you all can view it.
Yay! And if it doesn't happen in person, obviously I won't be there in person. But if it happens in person, it would be a lot of fun to come and see Cantor do her thing. So we'll flip back to me, and we're going to close out our service with, I haven't decided yet, but we'll see what the book opens to. And Kara, is there anything that you wanted to end with before I assume? No, shaking me off. No. All right, let's see. What would be a good... What would be a... I feel like I always get made fun of when I say we haven't done Yigdal in a long time, but we really haven't done it in a long time, so we'll do Yigdal, page 628. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach nimtza v'yehet el metziuto echad v'yachid yechudo nelam v'gam ein sof le'achduto en lo demut haguf ve'eino guf lo na'aroch elav kedushato kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra Rishon v'reshit l'reshito Hino Adon Olam lechol notzar yorek gedulato u'malchuto Sefer nevuato netan ohel Anshe segulato v'tifarto Lo kam b'Yisrael kemo she'od Nabi u'mabit et tunato Torah temet natan le'amoel Al yad v'hiyo neman beito Lo yachal Yifa'el v'lo yamir dato Le'olamim lezulato Sofer v'yodea setareinu Mabit l'sof davar bekadmato Gomer l'ish chesed kemifalo Noten rasha ra kerishato Yishlach l'ketz yamin Bedut olam kol chai v'yishakir yeshuato Chaye olam nata betocheinu Baruch adei ad shem tilato Chaye olam nata betocheinu Baruch adei ad shem tilato. We'll turn to page 604, Kaddish. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lahasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam oti leolam v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lahasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lahasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam U'ayo ashri Shabbat v'yinafash Shabbat v'yinafash Shabbat v'yinafash v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lahasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Al ken berach Adonai yom ha-Shabbat v'yikadshehu savri Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei peri hagafen. Amen. That part is always so weird because it looks like it's being blurred out, like there's something inappropriate. It's really strange. All right, Cantor, I'm going to bring you up on the screen so we can both say Shabbat Shalom to everybody. As always, a great opportunity to lead alongside you. And remember, again, Torah study will begin on Zoom at 12 o'clock, so you got time for a little bit of lunch, a little bit of stretch. Come on back, learn some Torah. Hopefully the rabbi will think of something to teach. And with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. So we'll say goodnight to the stream.